This is episode 1125.
Most recently, in July, as a leadership team, we came together where all the different departments reported out on some of the early successes in areas that we are deploying AI. We are hiring because of our high growth, but it's much more limited, where we're looking at how can we really drive efficiencies within the organization through AI. And I'll give one specific example, but there's plenty of others. We have a new platform that will now fill out 80% of an RFP based on prior questions, prior responses, and the productivity of the SCs that work on those RFPs have increased dramatically.
There's a lot of talk about AI reshaping business, but less about how it's reshaping finance leadership. What happens when a CFO is asked not just to report the numbers, but to reimagine the very systems that generate them? That's the territory we'll be exploring today. My guest has navigated market shocks, business model pivots, and company-defining acquisitions. And now he's steering finance at the edge of AI-driven planning. Our talk with CFO Jay Peir begins after this. Hello, CFO Jay Peir is with us. He currently serves as CFO and head of strategy at Pigment, an AI-powered planning platform. Previously, he spent a decade at Tableau, where he last served as a EVP of corporate development and strategy. Earlier in his career, he had a CFO stint at SunPower. Jay, welcome.
Thank you, Jack. It's excited to be here. Appreciate the invite.
So you just shared with me you listened to a number of episodes, so you know where I'm going to begin here. We're gonna ask you, Jay, to look back, try to identify some of the experiences you feel prepared you for a finance leadership role, this role you have. Tell us, what would those be?
You know, Jack, it's interesting. I had my first my first CFO experience at the age of 30. And just contrasting that to now being at Pigment and being CFO, world completely different. And so for me, I started my career, the first time I thought about being a CFO was essentially when I became a CFO at SunPower. So earlier on in my career, I grew up on the East Coast in New Jersey, went out west to the Bay Area, where I did 2 engineering degrees, bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering at Stanford. Worked as an analyst at an economic and financial consulting firm for a few years, and then went back to get my MBA at Stanford. And so for me, those early years were really setting the foundation of an analytical and technical background. I was at Stanford during the .com. So I think the other element of that is really my interest in growing and building tech companies came out of that time.
Who are you? You're not an accountant background. How would you characterize your early first chapter then?
My first role in finance was in corporate development. And then the piece that's always been, I think, more natural to me has been the FP&A strategic finance side of things.
So continue on. When do you get into a more senior finance role? What is the door that opens for you?
So I graduated from business school at the height of the .com era in 2000, and also saw the .com bust. So in the course of the first 2 years after business school, was at a few different startups, which were great experiences and from a learning experience. But I ended where that led me was really joining Cypress Semiconductor in the corporate development group. So with my electrical engineering background, I thought I could bring some unique perspectives to semiconductors. Shortly after I joined, my manager, who led corporate development at the time, moved on to another role. And so I was leading M&A, as well as there was a Cypress venture fund with 13 or 14 investments at the time, the largest of which was in SunPower, which is a high efficiency solar cell manufacturer. And I started working with SunPower, and they started looking for a new CFO. So I put my hat in the ring and was fortunate to be hired for the role. And so at the age of 30, with a year of corporate development experience, I became CFO.
It seems like you already knew, in terms of M&A, in terms of some of that early experience you got, you were someone who could help leadership assess and consider possible acquisitions. Was that already, sort of your specialization, or would you look at it differently?
No, I think I would agree with that, which is from the corporate development experience is really understanding more the business plan, the strategy, the various elements of building the potential for a company. So it was acquisitions plus looking at venture investments at the time when I joined, and I was helping SunPower initially with their financing plan and their business plan, and then joined as CFO. And I think that was back in 2003.
One of your interesting career chapters, again, I think I mentioned it up front, you spent 10 years at Tableau. And I wanted to ask, that company experienced rapid growth, created both, that growth created both opportunities and strains, I imagine. Looking back, what was the most challenging scaling moment for you? And how did it influence your leadership outlook going forward?
That's a great question. I think the most challenging moment for both myself and then also for the company was I was there for 10 and a half years, and there's probably three phases. The first phase was high growth initial phase where we scaled. When I joined, it was about 60 million in revenue. We became a public company that had the opportunity to lead the IPO process. And this was through 2016 where our growth started to slow, and our stock dropped about 50% in one day. In the combination of that, our CEO and founder, moved on to become chairman, and we hired a new CEO, Adam Selipsky from AWS. And then we also started transitioning our business model to subscription. So
all at that same juncture there.
All of that same time. So that was, I think, for all of us, the most challenging moment for a number of different reasons. And then the third chapter is being part of Salesforce towards the end.
Yeah, I want to ask you, that comes at, of course, in the final chapter there. But as far as, was it an acquisitive? Tell us something about Tableau and whether, over that 10-year span, the number of acquisitions you were involved in, or you gave a thumbs down to. What would you tell us?
We were selectively acquisitive. So during the time I was there, we did five or six acquisitions. We looked at a number of other acquisitions, many of them pretty seriously, but we were a highly acquisitive company. I think earlier on, with our high growth, the risk of a larger acquisition kind of derailing that high growth was too great. And so I think that made sense. But we had a few that were more technology based, and then a few more material acquisitions later on, before we became part of Salesforce.
So it sounds like when there were acquisitions, and just to clarify, were you buying scale versus acquiring strategic capabilities that would extend the platform? Was that a balance that you were working with?
We were mostly acquiring strategic capabilities, technical teams, technical capabilities. And I would contrast this with my experience at SunPower, where we had two very large acquisitions, the first of which essentially doubled the size of the organization. Right. But for Tableau, it was more acquiring capabilities that were additive to our technology roadmap.
You mentioned the transition to subscription. Of course, a journey many tech firms went down that path. How did your collaboration, curious how your collaboration with the finance function as a corporate development executive evolved during that time? And whether, was it different? Was your relationship different with the finance function before the subscription versus after the adoption of the subscription model?
Jack, maybe just to add a little bit more color, I would say my career at SunPower was, for the most part, in the finance organization in different roles. At Tableau, it was corporate development and strategy, but I very much straddled both reporting to the CEO and CFO for a good amount of my time during there. So I led FP&A and investor relations for a number of years. I led sales planning for a number of years as well. So as I was leading the transition to subscription, very much, I'm trying to think at the time, I may not have been still managing FP&A, but I was very much connected and part of the finance organization. I was still responsible for setting the quotas and the sales plan. So very much integrated, cross-functional, complete company project to transition from perpetual license model to subscription model.
Yeah. Any lessons you can share with us? I mean, you were driving the change. You had to be one of the primary executives involved in making this transition happen. Are there any lessons from that sort of change management challenge?
There's certainly a number that I can think of. Number one was we really took a thoughtful approach to the way we were managing and looking at various aspects. So making sure we had the various stakeholders from sales, from marketing, from finance, and so it did change dramatically. So one is making sure we have the right teams that have thought through the various implications. I think there's both the internal and external change management. So making sure after we made the decisions of how we would manage quotas, compensations, offers to customers, that we had the right enablement. So our teams not only understood the rationale, but can articulate it to our customers as well. And then there's the external piece of managing both customers and then also as a public company, how our metrics would change as we were going through the transition to subscription. So, all of those things were key factors.
So, large acquisitions often, almost always bring complexity. What stands out to you about the negotiations or the process that shaped how the Salesforce Tableau deal came together?
Maybe I can bifurcate it to the deal phase, and some of the learnings or experiences from there, and then the integration, into Salesforce post acquisition. So on the deal side, it was a 6-month process. So, Adam and I, we had our first meeting with Brett Taylor, John Smorjai, Alex Dayon from Salesforce. They came to our office. This was December of 2018 with an interest in better understanding, the company. And then a month later is when we got the first formal offer, for the company. And as a public company, there's a very procedural process we have to follow in terms of getting our board making sure we had advisors and went through the process of negotiations. But it was an extended process for us where each phase, as we got deeper in the process, I think one of the challenges is we try to keep the team as small as possible initially. And as we were going through the first phase of diligence, expanded a little bit because of the risks of leaks and the confidentiality nature. Towards the end, we had about 50 people in the company who knew about the deal, who were helping with the deep diligence. Salesforce probably had over 100 people. At that point, if it didn't go through, it's like Humpty Dumpty, which is, you can't really put things back the way they were, having gone that far down the process. But I think credit to both our team and Salesforce. We navigated that 6-month period of time well, to where we reached a definitive agreement and signed it in June of 2019.
All right. Well, we might have some more career-related questions for you a little later. Right now, let's find out about this company, Pigment. Tell us about it. What are its offerings today? What sets this company apart?
Sure. Pigment is an AI native planning and performance management platform. So at our core, we make it easier for organizations to plan, model, understand, and act on their data. Essentially, we help democratize access to data for better decision making and business results. So we help companies with proactive decisions. So what are the hiring plans for next year? How do you set territories and quotas for your sales team for next year? How do you design your supply chain or your demand forecasting? And on the reactive side is how do we can help companies really react to changes, macroeconomic tariffs, higher interest rates or inflation, changes and disruptions to the supply chain. All of those things really require a greater amount of agility and flexibility in your planning and performance management planning platform. And that's really what Pigment provides to our customers. And so we're helping, some of the leading companies in the world, from Fortune 500 companies, including Coca-Cola, Unilever, Otis Elevator, to many of the leading technology companies, so Snowflake, Block, ServiceNow, to over a third of the Forbes Cloud 100. So many of the most innovative companies in the world are our customers, to customers in every industry and vertical.
I read here that you've doubled annual recurring revenue year over year. And I'm wondering what are the segments then that you're targeting next? Where are you headed?
So for us, the way we look at growth is really among 3 different vectors. The first is really market segments. So we started with high growth technology companies, mid-market companies, and over the course of the last, I'd say 2 or 3 years, we've really made strong inroads across the enterprise. And so that's been our highest growth market of really targeting and servicing and selling to large enterprise customers. I think the second vector is across geography, where we're a French headquartered company. So with our EMEA roots, last couple of years, we've really made strong investments in North America, where close to 60% of our business now is in North America. And then the third vector is really use cases, where we started as a financial planning and performance management platform, but we also sell to revenue operations, sales operations for territories and quotas. We sell for workforce planning use cases, as well as supply chain. So the third growth vector has really been broadening from our core finance to more the integrated planning platform across the organization.
So it looks like the company raised last year anyway, 145 million. What is the mindset as far as the capital structure is concerned? Is this should we look to see you raise more additional funds, or are you on the IPO path?
We have had strong support from our investors, so raised close to 400 million since the company was founded. It's credit to our co-founders, especially Eleanor Crespo. We've raised money earlier than the company has needed. So our last Series D really gives us the funding for our next phase of growth. Our aspiration is to be one day a public company. But for now, we're really focused on how do we service our customers? How do we make the most impact and continue to drive high growth?
There was an announcement with Google Cloud. Can you tell us what does this mean? And again, we're trying to say, okay, is this a press release, or is this something more meaningful for Pigment?
So for us, Google Cloud is our core cloud platform that we're built and architected around with them. So many of our leading customers are on GCP, and so this is the partnership of really helping from that perspective. And we're also, I know, looking at some of the technical capabilities as well. But Google's certainly one of our technology partners from that perspective.
So, as our listeners know well, there are many planning offerings out there. Help us differentiate here. What some of the legacy solutions that are out there? What separates Pigment?
And this is coming from my own experience where I've used various EPM, enterprise performance management planning systems throughout my career, where what I found was most of those platforms were architected 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so one, they weren't designed for the speed of innovation needed to take, especially in the area of AI. And what I found, and most companies find, is those platforms are predominantly using for budgeting purposes, and a lot of the plans, revenue plans, demand forecasts, and other things are built in spreadsheets. And so planning is done across spreadsheets, EPM, with analytics done in BI, and decision making really is disjointed and inefficient across those three platforms. Pigment brings all of that together in a single platform. So we offer the agility and flexibility of spreadsheets, design integrated models to change plans and adapt plans as needed. I think second is an intuitive end user interface so that anyone in an organization can really use Pigment. And then third is really AI and our AI roadmap. So we have capabilities in generative AI to ask questions of your data or help you model quicker and easier. We have machine learning or predictive capabilities built into the platform. And we have customers now testing our first agent, our analyst, working with our first agent, our analyst agent, so that agent can go on its own with guidance, variance analysis, really understand deeper parts of the business. So you're not just analyzing data more quickly, but really helping to drive better performance through AI.
Want to understand then about those AI investments. Tell us something how you go about evaluating them from a financial ROI and strategic value perspective. There's lots of investments you could be making. Some you've opted for, others you've maybe next month, maybe next year, whatever it might be. But what's helping you make those decisions?
So for us as Pigment as an organization, we are very much forward leaning into AI and use of AI. And there's two main areas, one of which is the use of Pigment AI. And that's mostly across my teams, which is with finance and revenue operations, but also within other parts of the organization. And then there's the adoption of AI and other AI solutions, broadly within the organization. I'd say, one, we've encouraged, we have OpenAI, ChatGPT available for all employees, and that ends up being one of the platforms by which we're building custom GPTs and other applications. But we've had a challenge most recently in July as a leadership team. We came together where all the different departments reported out on some of the early successes in areas that we are deploying AI. And so from an investment to your question, finance perspective, we are hiring because of our high growth, but it's much more limited where we're looking at how can we really drive efficiencies within the organization through AI. And I'll give one specific example, but there's plenty of others where we have solutions consultants that are essentially some of their opportunities are through RFPs. We have a new platform that will now fill out 80% of an RFP based on prior questions, prior responses, and the productivity of the SCs that work on those RFPs have increased dramatically. And there's a number of other areas where we've seen that efficiency of our teams being able to do more because of AI.
But as it comes to finance or operations becoming more efficient, are you leveraging AI there? Is there a story that you can share with us there about making your finance function or your operations more efficient?
Sure. If I talk about Pigment AI first, so we have an analyst agent that will go at the direction of our team on specific missions. So within finance, we're looking at our variance analysis. We're looking at expense, really understanding where our expenditures are and what the areas of potential savings are. That's one use case internally where we're using our own AI. Revenue operations is a combination of looking at our pipeline and sales forecasting. It's looking at our top of funnel marketing metrics. It's looking at leads and insights scoring to really how do we increase the efficiency of all of those different efforts. So, so those are core use cases internally where we are using AI to drive value and greater efficiency.
Okay. As someone who's been in corporate development, the possibilities of growing through acquisition here, is that not on the menu? Are acquisitions on the menu here?
I think there's lots of similarities with Tableau in the sense where we have part of the value proposition of Pigment is we're an integrated planning platform. So we have our own platform for various use cases, and it's always hard to do an acquisition and bolt it on. And then second, I think with the high growth that we have, the time and resources focused on a large acquisition in many times is riskier than continuing to invest in what's already working and the myriad of opportunities that we have. When I look at the different use cases that I mentioned before, finance, sales, performance management, supply chain, workforce planning, entire companies are built around those different use cases. Consolidation is another one where we have our first consolidation customers in Europe. Each of those could be an acquisition, but we develop those capabilities internally. So I don't see us being a highly acquisitive company other than perhaps the capabilities in certain areas.
All right. Well, we're up to what we like to refer to as our finance strategic moment question. This might have happened any time during your career, might have happened 20 years ago, might have happened last week. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
I think for me, what comes to mind is really how CFOs and finance leaders can not only lead in the strategic direction and operations of the company, but really the culture. And I saw this and had a chance to contribute to this really at Tableau. So Tom Walker was the longtime CFO and really CEO of Tableau, where not only did he lead those different functions, but really very much helped to set the culture of Tableau and a few things, specific examples. So one was just some of the celebrations. So end of quarter, really being in the office with the team as we were working to close the deal. You would go around the offices with a conch shell whenever we hit the number and exceeded quota. Very much a partner to sales and marketing teams. Had a saying, which was, there's two jobs at any early stage company. You either sell the product or build the product. And that's really resonated with me when I've been at Pigment and also during my time, really being more than kind of a leader in the function, but how do we set an example from a culture, and an impact standpoint?
All right. Well, thank you for that. We'll jump to our mentoring round where we're going to ask you to look back. And I think you mentioned to us you were at SunPower when you first stepped into the CFO role. We always like to ask about first impressions, what you wish someone had told you before you stepped into that role for the first time. If you could go back in time maybe and tell yourself this, what would it be?
I think it would have been, or when I think about it, had I seen the trailer of the movie at the time, I might not have watched it, it was much for me, and it was unique because it was jumping into a role that was more than just drinking from a fire hose of learning core finance functions, high growth company, being in that role. So the couple of things that my advice, one is make sure you have your mentors and advisors that you can go to. I know there's a saying that's, it's loneliest role as a CEO, but CFO is also very similar. Where in that role and position, having trusted advisors that you can go to. So I was fortunate. My prior manager at Cypress, I was still meeting with on a weekly basis, Manny Hernandez, who's been a long-term mentor of mine. I think that's one piece of advice that I would give to others is, and then the second is, stepping into the CFO role. It really is, you're setting the tone from the top, and how you show up, how you message, the weight of your emails, it's much stronger than I realized at the time when I took the role. So being thoughtful of your communications, being thoughtful about, there's certain areas where you have to speak up as a CFO because that is your role and fiduciary duty to set the tone. So those are two of the things that come to my mind when I reflect back at my experience.
We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side. We're wondering if there's something perhaps your colleagues might not even know about you, something from your past, interest that you have, something that sets you apart. What would that be?
There's one thing from a professional standpoint, which my colleagues at Pigment, I think not many will know. Tableau certainly did know, which is probably the thing I'm proudest of my career. And I feel fortunate to have the different experiences that I've had, but probably the thing I'm proudest of is starting and really being the executive sponsor of the Tableau Foundation. So, helped to establish it before we went public with the founders of Tableau. And then really over the course of the 6 or 7 years, we donated over $100 million in funds, software, and expertise to really make a difference with our grantees. And it was, the funding was just part of it, but more core was the use of analytics and data to solve some of the world's largest problems. So we worked with PATH to help eradicate malaria in southern part of Zambia. We've worked with an organization Splash for more drinkable water. we helped to fund stop AAPI hate with the support also of Salesforce early in the pandemic. So those are, from a personal standpoint, one of the things I'm proud to have made an impact outside of my core responsibilities.
That's neat. When was that formed? Can you give us a rough idea? We don't need a specific date, but what years was that established?
It was, so Tableau went public in May of 2013. We established foundations a few months beforehand.
Yeah. And was the original concept, did it grow into some of the accomplishments you described? I mean, was it originally so ambitious, or what was the thinking behind it?
I think we knew that our Tableau and our platform really had a broader impact, across, because we saw it across our different customers. So there is I think when all of the founders and I first established it, we had different ideas of what we could do, but really, I hired the executive director, Neil Myrick, and his team, and they were the ones who really fully realized the vision and the impact that it could make. And we were inspired by Salesforce, who the Mark Benioff and the 1% pledge. That was one of the reasons I think we helped to create the Tableau Foundation.
Along the way, curious if there's a book or resource that's inspired you or something you recommend from time to time. Again, doesn't have to be a book, but might be something streaming. Don't know. Anything come to mind?
The book that comes to mind is The Art of Work by Jeff Goins. And it came out, I think, in 2016, and I read it shortly after it came out. And in many ways, I think it helped to, I don't know if it's validate, but reinforce some of the ways I've approached my career. So it's really, the book's about finding and pursuing one's calling, of, recognizing meaningful opportunities and relationships, and really allowing your path to unfold through a journey of discovery. So I know my career has certainly been that, and maybe it's a way to reinforce my own decisions, but there's a lot of things that really resonated with me about resilience, about the importance of also failure, and recognizing and pivoting from there. Yeah. So I think most people don't have a necessarily linear path. Maybe within finance, it tends to be more structured. But I certainly found Art of Work to be enlightening and help make some of my decisions later in my career as well.
Well, that's a great new selection for us. So thank you. We're always happy to get one that hasn't been mentioned before. So thank you for that. Finally, we're up to our final question, where we're going to ask you to look forward finally. And this is where we ask you for those priorities for the coming 12 months. What are your CFO priorities for that period? What would they be?
I think that the top two priorities, number one is really driving the growth of AI. And so that's, as a company, it really is Pigment AI, both for our customers and internally. And then more broadly, as we discussed, how do we best leverage AI throughout the organization? So that's one of the top goals for all of us. And then second is to grow and scale Pigment. I joined to build another hopefully impactful and lasting company, and we're well on our path there. But there's a lot of work that we all do on a day-to-day basis to make sure that happens. So how do we continue to grow and then drive efficiencies along the path as well and scale?
Jay Peir, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Great. Thank you, Jack. Appreciate the opportunity.